we're 2 these days.
Oh my God, that's
Crazy.
Yeah, time has flown, hasn't it?
She's 2?
2. She was 2 in April.
What?
Mm-hmm.
That seems not possible. That's
I know. And how's your little boy?
He's good. He's right here.
There he is.
He's doing well. He was just barking at the neighbor's dog.
Well, that's a good thing.
That's the way they communicate.
Yep.
Yeah, they had. You don't know. They might have had plenty to say.
That's right.
True.
He definitely does have plenty to say.
Okay. Very good. Yeah, we should be all the way able to hear it. Yeah, so we, if we sat here, we're trying to set ourselves up so that we can partake, all 3 of us.
Oh, great.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Roxanne.
Hi, Roxanne.
So there, hey, gang.
Look at Cindy's here.
I guess you can't no problem
Yes,
recognizing
we
me.
can.
Yes.
No
Oh,
problem.
that was me. Last week that texted you,
Oh, okay.
and then I forgot to reply.
Well, that's okay. Jan saved the
Hey,
day.
Jan.
Hi. Good to
That's
see
all.
you all.
Yeah, it's
Same
nice
difference
seeing
here.
you too. So how many folks are on board?
Right now, just us, but there's people in the waiting room. And we'll let them in about
Well,
60 seconds.
Okay, well, thanks for opening it up so we can do our chin and grin first. Yes, they have. Let's see. Now we can see all 4.
Are you doing it on your phone?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
And we found this great device that magnifies the screen from the cell phone.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. So that's what I'm gonna do. Here, you hold on to this. Yeah, you can get it from me. Anyhow, so because see the green line around there, that means that it's coming directly. My image is going is out, and the green means that I'm talking to.
Okay.
Hi, Lou.
Hi, Lou.
What's up, Lou?
Hi, everyone.
Oh, I was on mute. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Greetings from San Luis Obispo.
Wow.
Oh my! Oh hey, Lou, how are you?
Great. It's good to see everyone.
It's good seeing you too.
Hi, B.
Hey.
Oh, Maya, I just got your embroidery.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're so nice. I got both.
No, I actually had it hanging on our walls here, and I had to take it down to send it. And I'm like, no.
I can send you a new one to make.
Yes, please.
Okay. 2 of them or just 1?
2.
Okay.
We're still working on this mushroom, but I'd love to have more too.
Okay.
Everybody's working on it. Oh, I don't know. We'll find out.
So I think
This is all about an experiment.
last time we tried this too, but I think what would be great is if we do that introduction for 10 minutes and have everyone who wants to be able to introduce themselves. And last time we were doing it kind of popcorn style, so that you could call on the next person. But I'm wondering if we should just leave it open so that folks who want to say hello can say hello after someone's done talking. And if it ends up being that we have a lot of silence, we can go back to popcorn style, but let's try just letting people introduce themselves as they would like. So what we can do today is we'll say our names, our pronouns, where we're calling in from if we're comfortable sharing that, and what we're working on tonight. So I'm Maya. I use she, her pronoun. Calling in from Vermont, and I'm working on this mushroom still, like every other week. It's taking a while, but it's been fun.
I'm Ryan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm also working on that mushroom, and I'm also in Vermont. And this is our dog, Woody.
I'm Roxanne. I use she, her pronouns. I'm in Malibu, no, sorry, in Topanga with Lauren. And I'm working on this horse wheat. And I live in Venice.
Hi, I'm Shakura, and I live in she, her. I live in Burbank, and I'm working on my stenography because I'm not an embroiderer.
I'm going to go because I'm almost in Burbank. I'm in North Hollywood. Hi, I'm Joan.
Hey, Joan.
So we're neighbors, I guess. Practically in Burbank. I'm working on oyster mushrooms slowly, but I'll probably be listening. I find it's hard for me to really take in this material while I'm doing something else.
Hey there, Anessa here. She, her pronouns, Highland Park, LA. I have been working on this. I'm just starting to embroider, which I'm having a blast. I did my onion, but it's amazing. It's taken me forever to do this part. So I'm really excited to finish because I'm looking forward to my moth. It's hard to see that. You're not going to see it at all. Maybe back here. No, you cannot. You cannot see it. But it's exciting and I can't wait.
So for folks who are just arriving, we're doing 10 minutes of introductions. So that's names, pronouns, where you're calling in from, if you feel comfortable sharing, and what you're going to work on tonight.
My name is Lou. I'm tuning in from a little airstream in San Luis Obispo. My favorite pronouns are us and we because we're all in this together. And I am working on a leaf embroidery.
I'll jump in. Douglas Lee calling in from Los Angeles, California. He, him, they, everything, we, bless us all. And I am just in my studio and I'm going to be just listening while I organize my studio because that's what I perpetually do. It's a good meditation. Lovely to be with y'all.
Hi everyone, I'm Jen. I use she, her, and I'm calling in from Studio City, and I'm currently working on an embroidery of flowers. I had finished the mule fat about a week ago, and this is a piece that I had actually screened at the Prince Studio back in November. So I'm excited to be embroidering it now.
Now, I am Caroline Aisaguer, and I am also in Studio City. And I'm working slowly on a beggar stick, but I love it. And I'm so happy to be with all of you. Thank you.
Hola, I'm Millie Mason Moore. I'm calling in from Glassell Park. I'm currently cooking with my husband.
I am Eric Moore, and pronoun nosotros. And I am an assistant chef today.
Thank you for the readings.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm calling in from Topanga, and I am working on a lupine.
Nice.
Happy to be with you all tonight.
Hi, I'm Emily Jane. I'm calling in from Springs, way out of town. I just received my Hopi corn, so I'm starting on that tonight. And I find pronouns very aggravating.
Hello, this is Lexa. I'm calling from Pennsylvania, and we're having a lot of storms, so I might have to leave, but I'm going to listen as long as I can.
I'm Sylvia Holmes. I'm in Pasadena, California, she, her, and I finally put needle to material and got started on my California poppy.
I'm Rowena Koenig in Los Angeles. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm working on a prince mushroom, which I'm thrilled to be embroidering.
I am Michel from Highland Park, pronounced he, him, they, and I'm working on a semi-random t-shirt I found in the studio and applying random colors.
Hi, I'm Shelley Pausner. I'm calling from La Crescenta. I use she, her pronouns. Thanks for this first opportunity of embroidering. I'm doing a beggar stick, and it's fun. Thanks.
All right, well, thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. And if anyone feels that they'd like to introduce themselves now, feel free to do so in the chat. And we'll also have time at the end for discussion. And please feel free to introduce yourself then too. Always nice to have returning faces and new faces. And it's just good to see everyone. It's such an isolating time. So it's great to be in community with all of you. So I'm going to give a little introduction about where we are virtually. Welcome to the Abolitionist Reading and Native Plant Embroidery Zoom gathering hosted by the Metabolic Studio. I just wanted to give a brief intro and a little bit of context about what we're doing here. So the Metabolic Studio is located in downtown Los Angeles and is the practice of the artist Lauren Bond. Since 2016, Lauren has been conducting a community evening and potluck on Thursday nights, which began right after the last presidential election, when it became necessary for us to come together and create a space to voice what was going on in our communities and how we were all being impacted by the current administration. The Thursday evenings always started with a potluck and included message making in our printmaking workshop, and that practice of coming together once a week also includes many handcrafts with community members working with clay, weaving, and embroidering. And obviously, once the pandemic hit, we were no longer able to gather in person, so we decided to move onto the Zoom platform. Many of you here have already received embroidery kits in the mail, and for those of you who are interested in receiving a kit, please email Jen Curtis from the Metabolic team, and you can actually even just put it in the chat, and Jen here, she's here tonight, and you guys can coordinate from there. In this kit, you'll find a line drawing on fabric of a botanical plant, which is a part of the food and medicine that the Metabolic Studio is currently growing on 2 sites along the LA River. We also grow food up in Payahunadu, so-called Owens Valley, where Los Angeles steals its water. and in Vermont as an effort to give away free food to folks in need right now. So we drew images of these plants, transferred the drawings onto fabric, which we've then sent out to our community members, along with an embroidery hoop, needle, and thread. And in the kit, you should also have received a self-addressed return envelope with postage. So when you've finished your embroidery, you can use this to mail it back to the Metabolic Studio, and these will eventually be stitched into a hybrid object and connected to the readings and put into a piece together. So this space is intended to provide a time for us all to be together when we cannot physically be together, and to create an opportunity for us all to talk and exchange ideas while using our hands to craft. A week after we hosted our initial embroidery circle, the world changed. The witnessing of the murder of George Floyd broadcasted across the globe. In the midst of a global pandemic, Metabolic collectively decided to turn our focus on educating ourselves and our community members about systemic racism. This gathering is specifically focused on prison and police abolition, a topic that has decades of literature for us to dive into. So we've been asking questions like, how can we do better? How can we become better active accomplices in the movement for Black lives? And one way that we've come to kind of think about this is that we have the privilege of being able to hold space for readings and discussions, and that can help provide the fertile soil for a vibrant future where we all can thrive. So tonight we're going to be reading chapter 6 of Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor's book, From Black Lives Matter to Black Liberation, published in 2016. I want to give some notice. There are some content warnings in this reading. We will warn you before we read any passages that will contain content warnings, and you can feel free to turn down your volume. And we will give this symbol to let you know that the passage has ended, so you can turn your volume back up. For those of you who would like to read out loud with us tonight, I've put the link to the book in the chat. We're going to be reading chapter 6, and we've actually kind of taken sections out of chapter 6 because it's a long chapter and we want to have time for discussion as well. So I really highly recommend reading this book in its entirety and chapter 6 in its entirety. For tonight, we chose just enough time for us to have reading and also conversation. So I'm going to put that link again in the chat for folks who'd like to get the book. It's available for $6 on Haymarket's website as an ebook. And then I'm going to put in the chat the sections that we're reading tonight. And for folks who will be reading out loud with us, I believe Ryan and I are going to be reading the start of the chapter, which contains the content warnings. I don't believe the rest of the reading does, but if it does, if it happens to come up, we'll stop you so that we can give warning. So, is there anyone here tonight who would like to read out loud with us? If so, you can either unmute yourself and let us know or put it in the chat.
I'm happy to help with the reading if it's helpful to you guys.
That would be great, Emily. Thank you. So I've put that section in the chat. We're going to be reading the first section of the chapter. We're going to be reading a section called Black Lives Matter. We're going to be reading Solidarity and then the conclusion. I think the pages should sync up, Joan, I think, because we took it from the ebook.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But if not, then you can go by section if that's helpful. And if it's too confusing, we can always just, Ryan and I can read it.
Not a problem.
So before we start, we want to leave a question for us to think about. None of us are free until all of us are free. So what do each of us have at stake in the face of widespread oppression and inequality? I'm going to put that in the chat. Yeah, you need to buy it, Emily. It's $6 as an ebook. And the link is here. Do you want to start?
Yeah. All right. Chapter 6, Black Lives Matter, a movement, not a moment. And it starts with a quote. What happened to my daughter was unjust. It was just unjust. It was really unjust. I've been through all the range of emotions that I can go through concerning this, but I will not stop, as all the rest of the mothers have said, until I get some answers. Cassandra Johnson, mother of Tanisha Anderson, killed by Cleveland police in 2014. Every moment needs a catalyst, an event that captures people's experiences and draws them out from their isolation into a collective force with the power to transform social conditions. Few could have predicted what white police officer Darren Wilson shooting Mike Brown would ignite, a rebellion in a small, largely unknown Missouri suburb called Ferguson. For reasons that may never be clear, Brown's death was a breaking point for the African Americans of Ferguson, but also for hundreds of thousands of black people across the United States. Perhaps it was the inhumanity of the police leaving Brown's body to fester in the hot summer sun for 4.5 hours after killing him, keeping his parents away at gunpoint and with dogs. Quote, "We was treated like we wasn't parents, you know," said Mike Brown Sr., and that's what I, end quote, "that's what I didn't understand. They sicked dogs on us. They wouldn't let us identify his body. They pulled guns on us," end quote. Maybe it was the military hardware the police brandished when protests against Brown's death arose, with tanks and machine guns and a never-ending supply of tear gas, rubber bullets, and swinging batons. The Ferguson Police Department declared war on black residents and anyone who stood in solidarity with them. Since then, hundreds more protests have erupted. As the United States celebrates various 50th anniversaries of the black freedom struggles of the 1960s, the truth about racism and brutality of the police has broken through the veil of segregation that has shrouded it from the public view. There have been periodic ruptures in the domestic quietude that is so often misinterpreted as the docility of American democracy. The brutal beating of Rodney King, the sodomy of Abner Louima, the extinction of Amadou Diallo. These beatings and murders did not lead to a national movement, but they were not forgotten. As Ferguson protester Zakiya Jamaat said, quote, "My first protest was in 1999 when Amadou Diallo was murdered by the police. I haven't seen any charges and have not changed my perception of police officers," end quote. It is impossible to answer and perhaps futile to ask the question, why Ferguson? Just as it's impossible ever to accurately calculate when enough is enough. The transformation of Mike Brown's murder from a police killing into a lynching certainly tipped the scales. Writer Charles Pierce captured what many felt. Quote, "Dictators leave bodies in the street. Petty local satraps leave bodies in the street. Warlords leave bodies in the street. Those are the places where they leave bodies in the street as objects, lessons, or to point out, or to make a point, or because there isn't the money to take the body away and bury them, or because nobody gives a damn whether they are there or not," end quote. In the hours after Brown's body was finally moved, residents erected a makeshift memorial of teddy bears and memorabilia on the spot where police had left his body. When the police arrived with a canine unit, one officer let a dog urinate on the memorial. Later, when Brown's mother, Leslie McSpadden, laid out rose petals in the form of his initials, a police cruiser whizzed by, crushing the memorial and scattering the flowers. The next evening, McSpadden and other friends and family went back to the memorial site and laid down a dozen roses. Again, a police cruiser came through and destroyed the flowers. Later that night, the uprising began. The police response to the uprising was intended to repress and punish the population who had dared to defy their authority. It is difficult to interpret in any other way their injudicious use of tear gas, rubber bullets, and persistent threats of violence against an unarmed civilian population. The Ferguson police, a 95% white and male force, obscured their badges to hide their identities, wore wristbands, proclaimed, quote, "I am Darren Wilson," end quote, and pointed live weapons at unarmed civilians engaged in legal demonstrations. The municipality resembled a rogue state, creating arbitrary rules governing public protests and assaulting the media as both an act of revenge and an attempt to hide the sheer brutality of its operation. In the 12 days following Brown's death, 172 people were arrested, 132 of whom were charged with only failure to disperse. At one point during the demonstrations, a Ferguson officer pointed his AR-15 semi-automatic rifle in the direction of a group of journalists. This is a trigger warning, and yeah.
There's gonna be flagrant language in this and threatening language. So if folks need to turn their volume down, now is the time to do so.
The officer screamed, "I'm going to fucking kill you." When someone asked, "What's your name, sir?" he screamed, "Go fuck yourself." For a moment, the brutal realities of black life in Ferguson were exposed for all to see. Black protesters went on to unmask the kleptocracy at the heart of the municipal operations in Ferguson, revealing that the Ferguson Police Department, directed by the mayor and city council, were targeting the black population as the major source of revenue for the town. Also see Chapter 4. Black households were inundated with fines, fees, citations, tickets, and arrests to such an extent that the revenues were the town's second leading source of revenue. Court fines deriving from motor vehicle violations were 21% of revenue, accounting for, quote, the equivalent of more than 81% of police salaries before overtime, end quote. Failure to pay or appear in court to respond to tickets instantly produced an arrest warrant. Emails between city administrators openly called for more. In March 2013, the finance director wrote to the city manager, quote, "Court fees are anticipated to rise about 7.5%. I did ask the chief if he thought the PD or police department could deliver 10%. He indicated he could try," end quote. By December 2014, the department had 16,000 outstanding arrest warrants, mostly for minor offenses. 95% of traffic stops were directed at black drivers. I want to repeat that. 95% of traffic stops were directed at black drivers. As the DOJ report said, quote, "Ferguson law enforcement practices are directly shaped and perpetuated by racial bias," end quote. That's from the DOJ. Black people in Ferguson were living under the near complete domination of the police. Indeed, as the daily protests went on, the Ferguson police's escalating brutality and lawlessness seemed to arise out of frustration that they could not make the black men and women of Ferguson submit. Quentin Baker, a 19-year-old from St. Louis, observed, quote, "All of these things happen after the police provoke it. What they want to do is impose their will," end quote. Just as residents rebuilt the memorials of Mike Brown within hours every time the police tried to destroy them, the same dynamic held for the protests. Every night, the police used tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse the crowd. The next day, the crowds would reemerge. Ferguson activist Janet Elzy described how the protesters were changing even in the face of, quote, "unthinkable," end quote, police violence. "I became less of a peaceful protester and more of an active one. Using my voice to chant loudly along with other protesters seemed to be enough, but it wasn't. Instead, I decided to yell directly at the police. I decided to dare the police to look at I decided to dare the police to look at the faces of the babies and children their dogs were so ready to chase down. As more people began to look directly at the police and yell their grievances, the more aggravated they became. End quote. Protester Dante Carter said, quote, "I've been down here since the first day. We all had the same pain and anger about this. We all came together that day. They're killing us, and it's not right." End quote. This next section, it's about a good paragraph long, is another warning. It describes police murders. So if you need to turn down your volume, now is the time. Carter's words addressed the urgency of a summer that had turned into a killing season. Just weeks before Mike Brown was shot, the world had watched video of New York City cop Daniel Pantaleo choking the life out of Eric Garner. 4 days before Brown was killed, the police struck in a suburb of Dayton, Ohio. John Crawford III, a 22-year-old unarmed African-American man, was killed in the aisle of a Walmart while he talked on the phone with the mother of his children. Crawford had been holding a toy gun. Even though Ohio is an open carry state where citizens are allowed to carry unconcealed guns, local police opened fire on Crawford with little to no warning, killing him. 2 days after Brown's murder, police in Los Angeles shot unarmed Ezeal Ford 3 times in the back as he lay face down on the sidewalk. The following day, elsewhere in California, Dante Parker, a 36-year-old African-American man, was detained by the police and tasered multiple times before dying in police custody. The Ferguson Rebellion became a focal point for the growing anger in black communities across the country. For almost the entire fall, the Ferguson movement focused on winning an indictment of Darren Wilson. Prosecutors worked to drag out the grand jury proceedings as long as possible, believing that the cold weather would edge the movement off the streets. Undoubtedly, given the level of repression, the intensity of the August protests was not sustainable over time. But when that level of intensity waned, the persistence of the protests kept the movement alive. Activists and others from around the country were also important in helping sustain the local movement. In late August 2014, Darnell Moore and Patrisse Cullors of Black Lives Matter organized a, quote, freedom ride, end quote, to bring people from all around the country to the suburb in solidarity with the local movement. Moore described the breadth of the mobilization. Quote, "More than 500 people traveled from across the United States and Canada to provide various forms of support to the activists on the ground in Ferguson. Those who traveled with us represented a new and diverse contingent of black activists. We weren't all the same age, nor did we share the same political viewpoints. We weren't all heterosexual, or documented, or free from past involvement with the criminal justice system. Some of us were transgender, disabled, or bisexual," end quote. Local activists held vigils, picketed the Ferguson Police Department, and blocked traffic on Interstate 70, which runs through Ferguson in a dogged effort to maintain pressure on local officials to indict Wilson. Continued police harassment was also critical to sustaining the movement. In late September, Mike Brown's memorial was doused with gasoline and ignited. The flames revitalized the protests. More than 200 people gathered in an angry protest that saw 5 people arrested. When local officials... Oh, here, you want to start? Here.
When local officials began to speculate that the grand jury decision would be made public in October, local activism picked up. A multiracial protest erupted in the solidarity song, "Which Side Are You On?" during a performance of the St. Louis Symphony. When the protesters marched out chanting "Black Lives Matter," many in the audience, including symphony musicians, applauded. On October 8th, an off-duty St. Louis police officer, sorry, this is a content warning of police murders, so if anyone needs to turn their volume off, now's the time. On October 8th, an off-duty St. Louis police officer fired at Black teenager Von Derek Myers 17 times, hitting him with 8 bullets and killing him. Days after Myers' death, 200 students marched from Myers' neighborhood called Shaw to join hundreds more students in an occupation of St. Louis University, SLU. For several more days, more than 1,000 students occupied the campus, harkening back to the days of the Occupy movement. The occupation of SLU coincided with Ferguson October, in which hundreds of people traveled to Ferguson in solidarity with the local movement, but also to register their own protest. As protester Richard Wallace from Chicago put it, quote, "Everybody here is representing a family member or someone that's been hurt, murdered, killed, arrested, deported," end quote. Ferguson officials continued to stall in announcing Wilson's fate, but the resilience of the Ferguson movement was inspiring people far beyond the Midwest. Historian Donna Murch wrote, quote, "I have no words to express what is happening in Ferguson. In the name of Michael Brown, a beautiful black storm against state violence is brewing, so dense it has created a gravity of its own, drawn in people from all over the U.S., from centers of wealth and privilege, to the city whose most prosperous years were a century ago. It looks explicitly not only to St. Louis City and Council, it looks explicitly not only to St. Louis City and County Police and other municipal law enforcement, but also to the imperial wars in the Middle East as sites of murder and trauma. The call repeated over and over is Stokely Carmichael's organize, organize, organize. And this growing youth movement has all the ancestral sweetness of kinship. In the words of a local hip-hop artist and activist, quote, our grandparents would be proud of us." So now we are going to go to the section of this chapter entitled Black Women Matter on page 246. Most murders of Black people at the hand of the state go unnoticed by the public and unreported by the mainstream media. The few cases, compared to the significantly larger number of people killed, that do come into the public spotlight often involve Black men or boys. This was certainly true in Ferguson and Baltimore. This is not entirely surprising, since when police shoot to kill, they are usually taking aim at African American men. But Black women who are partnered with, have children with, or parent Black men and boys also suffer the effects of violence against them. The erasure of this particular way that Black women experience police violence minimizes the depth and extent of the harm caused by the abusive policing state. Black men falling under the control of the criminal justice system has a deleterious impact on their families and neighborhoods. Ex-convict status increases rates of poverty and unemployment, and the formerly incarcerated are banned from access to federal programs intended to blunt the worst effects of poverty, including housing vouchers, student loans, and other forms of financial aid. These policies affect not only Black men, but also Black women, who have Black men in their lives. Black women, however, are also the victims of the policing state, including police violence and imprisonment. While Trayvon Martin became a household name, most people are not familiar with the case of Marissa Alexander, a Black woman who was a victim of domestic violence. After using a firearm to keep her abuser at bay, Alexander invoked Florida's, quote, "stand your ground" statute as his defense. Although George Zimmerman, who killed Martin, succeeded in using this defense, Alexander was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Even though Alexander would eventually be released from jail, the contrast was a stark reminder of the dual system of justice in the United States. The police also kill Black women. The names of Rakia Boyd, Shelley Frey, Miriam Carey, and Alberta Spruill are less familiar than those of Mike Brown or Eric Garner, but their killings were motivated by the same dehumanizing factors. Police also viewed Black women's lives with suspicion and ultimately as less valuable, making their death and brutalization more likely, not less. It is hardly even newsworthy when Black women, including Black trans women, are killed or violated by law enforcement because they are generally seen as less feminine or vulnerable. Consider the case of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Police officer Daniel Holtzclaw, who was convicted of raping 13 Black women while on duty. Holtzclaw is believed to have targeted Black women because they were, quote, of lower social status, meaning that they were less likely to be believed and fewer people would care. Indeed, Holtzclaw's crimes barely made a ripple in the national news. Joan, do you feel like reading?
Even though Black women have always been susceptible to violence from the police and the criminal justice system, where organizing and struggle have emerged, they have, for the most part, had a male face. For cases that develop a national profile, a male lawyer or reverend or civil rights leader, such as Al Sharpton, is usually the most visible face. Of course, mothers and other women in the lives of the typically male victims are heard from, but the activism has been seen as male-led and organized until Ferguson. In fact, the media have been particularly cognizant of the, quote, women of Ferguson, unquote, as central to turning, quote, a string of protests into a movement by seemingly shifting between the roles of peacekeepers, disruptors, organizers, and leaders, close quotes. Indeed, the women who played an indispensable role in keeping the Ferguson movement together through the summer until the early winter were also aware of their role. As Brittany Farrell points out, quote, the media has left out that if it were not for Black women, there would be no movement. We have seriously carried this to where it is now, not to say that there are no men out there doing their thing, because there are. What I am saying is that women have been there since day one. We are willing to lay our lives on the line to keep up the good fight without the support from anyone or any organization. Hence why we built our own, close quotes. To ask why Black women have played such a central role in this movement is to assume that they have played a lesser role in other movements. It should go without saying that Black women have always played an integral role in the various iterations of the Black freedom struggle. Whether it was Ida B. Wells, who risked her life to expose the widespread use of lynching in the South, or the mothers of the wrongfully accused Scottsboro boys who toured the world to build a campaign to free their sons, Black women have been central to every significant campaign for Black rights and freedom. Black women, including Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, Diane Nash, and countless and unknown others were critical to the development of the civil rights movement, but that movement is still primarily known by its male leaders. Today, though, the face of the Black Lives Matter movement is largely queer and female. How has this come to be? Female leadership may actually have been an outcome of the deeply racist policing Black men have experienced in Ferguson. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, while there are 1,182 African American women between the ages of 25 and 34 living in Ferguson, there are only 577 African American men in this age group. More than 40% of Black men in both 20 to 24, 35 to 54 age groups in Ferguson are missing. It's not just Ferguson. Across the United States, 1.5 million Black men are, quote, missing, unquote, snatched from society by imprisonment or premature death. To put it starkly, quote, more than 1 out of every 6 Black men who today should be between 25 and 54 years old have disappeared from daily life, unquote. This does not mean that if the 40% of Black men missing from Ferguson were present, they would be playing the same role that women have played in building, organizing, and sustaining the movement. But it does provide a concrete example of the impact of the hyper-aggressive, revenue-generating to policing in Ferguson. It is more likely that these women have stepped into leadership roles because of the absolutely devastating impact of policing and police violence in Black people's lives in general. But whatever the reasons, their presence has contributed more than just gender balance. The Black women leading the movement against police brutality have worked to expand our understanding of the broad impact of police violence in Black communities. Sometimes this is articulated through the straightforward demand that society as a whole recognize that the police victimize Black women. Quote, the media is excluding the fact that the police brutality and harassment in our communities impacts the women just as much as the men, end quote, says Zakia Jemmett, adding, quote, they're highlighting Black male lives and pushing the Black female lives lost to police violence to the side. I want for the media to understand that all Black lives matter, close quotes. But Black women have also made a much more deliberate intervention to expose police brutality as much of a much larger, and let me start that sentence. But Black women have also made a much more deliberate intervention to expose police brutality as part of a much larger system of oppression in the lives of all Black working class and poor people. Charlene Carruthers of Black Youth Project 100 explains, quote, important because we are really serious about creating freedom and justice for all Black people, but all too often Black girls and Black women and girls, Black LGBTQ folk are left in the sidelines. And if we are going to be serious about liberation, we have to include all Black people. It's really that simple, and it's been my experience that issues of gender justice and LGBT justice have been either secondary or not recognized at all, close quote. The Black women who created the hashtag Black Lives Matter, Patrice Cullors, Opal Tometi, and Alicia Garza, articulate most clearly the overlapping oppressions confronting Black people in the struggle to end police violence and win justice. In an essay that captures the expansive nature of Black oppression while arguing that the movement cannot be reduced only to brutality, Alicia Garza writes, quote, it is an acknowledgement Black poverty and genocide is state violence. It is an acknowledgement that 1 million Black people are locked in cages in this country. 1/2 of all people in prisons or jails is an act of state violence. It is an acknowledgement that Black women continue to bear the burden of a relentless assault on our children and our families, and that assault is an act of state violence. Black, queer, and trans folks bearing a unique burden in a heteropatriarchal society that disposes of us like garbage and simultaneously fetishizes us and profits off of us is state violence. The fact that 500,000 Black people in the US are immigrants and relegated to the shadows is state violence. The fact that Black girls are used as negotiating chips during times of conflict and war is state violence. Black folks living with disabilities and different abilities bear the burden of state-sponsored Darwinian experiments that attempt to squeeze us into boxes of normality defined by white supremacy is state violence, close quote. The focus on, quote, state violence, close quote, strategically pivots away from a conventional analysis that would reduce racism, tensions, and actions of the individuals involved. The declaration of, quote, state violence, unquote, legitimizes the corollary demand for, quote, state action, unquote. It demands more than the removal of a particular officer or the admonishment of a particular police department, but calls attention to the systemic forces that allow the individuals to act with impunity. Moreover, these organizers are, quote, intersectional, unquote, in their approach to organizing. In other words, they start from the basic recognition that the oppression of African Americans is multidimensional and must be fought on different fronts. The analytic reach of these organizers is what really underlies the tension between the, quote, new guard, unquote, and the old guard, unquote. In some ways, it demonstrates that today's activists are grappling with questions similar to those Black radicals confronted in the Black Power era, questions bound up with the systemic nature of Black oppression, American capitalism, and how that shapes the approach to organizing. I need to take a breath, I'm sorry.
You can pass it to Emily if you're ready, Emily.
Sure, I downloaded the book, but I need to know where to pick it up. Happy to read.
We're on the bottom of page 252.
Okay.
Placing police brutality.
The paragraph starts with placing police brutality. Are there page numbers on that, on the ebook?
Yeah. I'm sorry, on my ebook it's 3484, but that could be.
Okay, well then, whatever Jones is, because it must be different then, because we printed
Okay.
it.
So, Joan, what page number?
Well, the way mine is set up, it says location 3484 at 57%, but I've caught my breath. If you want to, I can read a bit more, and you want to.
Okay, I'll try to find where we are.
All right.
If you can't, Emily, Joan, you can pass it back to Ryan when you're done.
Okay. Placing police brutality into a wider web of inequality has largely been missing from the more narrowly crafted agendas of the liberal establishment organization like Sharpton's National Action Network, or NAN, which have focused more on resolving the details of particular cases than on generalizing about the systemic nature of police violence. This has meant that mainstream civil rights organizations tend to focus on legalistic approaches to resolve police brutality compared to activists who connect police oppression to other social crises in Black communities. All right, Emily, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Oh. And can you, I had it, but can you tell me the first sentence where we are?
Whoops. I'll tell you the beginning of the paragraph where I started. Placing police brutality into a wider web of inequality has largely been missing from the more narrowly crafted agendas of a liberal establishment organization like Sharpton's National Action Network, or NAN, which have focused more on resolving the details of particular cases than on generalizing about the systemic nature of police violence.
I'm so sorry. I'm new to books. I had it and now I've lost it again.
I know, they're crazy.
We'll take over from here.
Don't worry.
Don't worry about it. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
There's a
Not at
section
all.
coming up called Solidarity, which you're very welcome to take over there if you want.
Okay, I'll find that and pin it.
You got it. This has meant that the mainstream civil rights organizations tend to focus on legalistic approaches to resolve police brutality, compared to activists who connect police oppression to other social crises in Black communities. Of course, that approach has not been fully supplanted. A significant focus of the Ferguson movement was voter registration and increasing the presence of African Americans in local governing bodies. But the movement in Ferguson has also validated those who embraced a much wider view by showing how the policing of African Americans is directly tied to the higher levels of poverty and unemployment in Black communities through the web of fees and fines and arrest warrants, trapping Black people in a never-ending cycle of debt. The gravity of the crisis confronting Black communities, often stemming from these harmful encounters with the police, legitimizes the need for more encompassing analysis. It allows people to generalize from the police violence to the ways that public funding for police comes at the expense of other institutions, and creates the space to then ask why. Not only do the new guard's politics stand in sharp contrast to those of the old guard, but so does their approach to organizing. Beyond being led by women, the new guard is decentralized and is largely organizing the movement through social media. This is very different from the national organizations like the NAACP or NAN, or even Jackson's Operation Push, whose mostly male leaders make decisions with little input or direction from the people on the ground. This strategy is not simply the product of male leadership, but of an older model that privileged leveraging connections and relationships within the establishment over street activism or using street protests to gain leverage within the establishment. The newness of the Ferguson movement and the incipient movement against police violence have temporarily prevented that kind of political shortcut. All right, Emily, did you see where solidarity is?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I see where it says political shortcut. So that's the sentence you just finished.
If you go forward,
so we are skipping through sections. So solidarity is the next section,
which is like
which
20
is not
pages
it's not
ahead.
after that, so it might be.
I'm almost there. I swear. Solidarity. Okay.
There you go.
Sorry, you guys. New to ebooks. Okay. Solidarity. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm so embarrassed.
Don't worry, Emily. It's totally fine.
Okay, solidarity.
Okay.
One important frontier of the movement also involves its capacity to develop solidarity with other oppressed groups of people. I'm going to take that just one more time. Solidarity. One important frontier of the movement also involves its capacity to develop solidarity with other oppressed groups of people. African Americans have always felt the most punishing aspects of life under American capitalism acutely. This has not meant, however, that Black people are alone in their desire to transform the harshness of society. The oppression of Indigenous people, immigrants, and non-white people more generally pervades American society. In profound ways, it is the secret to the conundrum of how the 1% can dominate a society where the vast majority has every interest in undoing the existing order. Basic math would seem to indicate that 12 or 13% of the population, which is what African Americans constitute, would have no realistic capacity to fundamentally transform the social order of the United States. The challenge for the movement is transforming the goal of freedom into digestible demands that train and organize its forces so that they have the ability to fight for more. The movement must also have a real plan for building and developing solidarity among the oppressed. This means building networks and alliances. Building networks and alliances with Latinos in opposition to attacks on immigrant rights, connecting with Arabs and Muslims campaigning against Islamophobia, and organizing with Native organizations that fight for self-determination within the United States. This is not an exhaustive list. It is only a beginning. The struggle to build solidarity between oppressed communities, however, is not obvious. For example, when 3 young Muslims, Dia Barakat, Razan Abu Salah, and Yusor Abu Salha, were shot and killed by a white man in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and activists began the hashtag Muslim Lives Matter, there was a backlash. Some activists described the hashtag as an appropriation of the ongoing Black movement. This is not at all to undermine or belittle the injustices that other minority groups in this country deal with every day. This is a quote, I believe. In fact, it is quite the opposite. Every community deserves to be able to think critically about their own positions in America, about their own challenges, about their own experiences, and in their own terms. Of course, Muslim lives are under fire in our American systems. There is no question about that. However, building off the Black Lives Matter trend equates struggles that are, though seemingly similar, drastically different. It is one thing to respect the organizing that has gone into the movement against police violence and brutality, but quite another to conceive of Black oppression and anti-Black racism as so wholly unique that they are beyond the realm of understanding and, potentially, solidarity from others who are oppressed. In the contest to demonstrate how oppressions differ from one group to the next, we miss how we are connected through oppression and how those connections should form the basis of solidarity, not a celebration of our lives on the margins. The American government demonizes its enemies to justify mistreating them, whether it is endless war, internment and torture, or mass incarceration and police abuse. There is a racist feedback loop in which domestic and foreign policies feed and reinforce each other. This is why U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East has reverberated at home. The cynical use of Islamophobia to whip up support for continued American interventions in Arab and Muslim countries inevitably has consequences for Muslim Americans. And the ever-expanding security state justified by the war on terror becomes the pretext for greater police repression at home, which, of course, disproportionately affects African Americans and Latino as in border regions. In the late 1990s, a movement began to stop racial profiling against Black drivers in police stops. Major class action lawsuits in Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Florida highlighted the extent to which African Americans were subjected to unwarranted suspicion and harassment on the nation's interstates. New Jersey became a center of anti-profiling activism when, in the spring of 1998, during a routine police stop, an officer fired into a van filled with young African American men. Al Sharpton led a protest of several hundred people, including a 500-car motorcade, onto Interstate 95. That same year, the ACLU filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of several Black motorists who complained of racially motivated traffic stops on Interstate 95. The widespread suspicion of Blacks and Latinas. Maya, do you know how I should pronounce? Did I pronounce that correctly? Latinas. Because I see.
So Emily's talking about when it's Latino and there's a dash AS at the end, so it's referencing Latinos and Latinas. I also was wondering how to read that like most effectively, and I think just Latinos and Latinas would be the most effective. Yeah, just exactly how you did it.
Okay, cool. Oh my gosh. Let's see. Did I manage to lose my place in the ebook? In the late 1990s? Does that seem like where I am? In the late 1990s, a movement began to stop racial profiling against Black drivers in police stops. Major class action lawsuits in Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Florida highlighted the extent to which African Americans were subjected to unwarranted suspicion and harassment on the nation's interstates. New Jersey became a center of anti-profiling activism when, in the spring of 1998, during a routine police stop, I'm sorry, I'm rereading because I got lost. Am I? Sorry.
Joan, do you want to hop in?
Sorry.
That's okay, don't worry. Joan, we can't hear you. I think you might be muted.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted. Latinas. The widespread suspicion of Blacks and Latinos or Latinas contributed to an atmosphere of intimidation and an implicit threat of violence. In parentheses, this certainly seemed to be the case with the 1999 murder of Amadou Diallo, which touched off a wave of protests and civil disobedience demanding the prosecution of the cops involved, close parentheses. Then, in March 1999, Republican New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman fired the state police superintendent when he said profiling was justified because, quote, mostly minorities, unquote, trafficked in marijuana and cocaine. The movement's momentum, however, was dramatically cut short in the aftermath of the terrorist attacks of 9/11. The U.S. government rushed to turn tragedy into a call for national unity in preparation for a new war with Afghanistan in 2001 and later in Iraq. Moreover, federal agents justified racial profiling to hunt down Muslims and Arabs in the aftermath. No longer was this tactic subject to federal investigation and lawsuits. It became a legitimate and widely supported tool in the war on terror. For example, in 1999, 59% of Americans said they believed that the police engaged in racial profiling. Of those, 81% thought the practice was wrong. Even George W. Bush, several months before 9/11, addressed a joint congressional session on the practice to declare, quote, racial profiling is wrong and we will end it in America, close quote. However, by September 30th, 2001, Black support for racial profiling of Arabs had jumped to 60% compared to 45% among the general population. Not only was the developing struggle against racism buried under a wave of jingoism and Islamophobic racism, but the focal point of the anti-racist struggle, racial profiling, was now being championed as a necessary tool to protect the United States. When the movement reflects divisions that the American state actively promotes, it makes all of the movements against racism weaker. This does not mean movements should paper over differences among various groups of people, but it does mean there is a need to understand the commonalities and overlaps in oppression, while also coming to terms with the reality that there is a lot more to gain by building unity and a lot more to lose by staying in our respective corners. End of that unit. Did you want me to continue?
Yeah, so we're going to read the conclusion. If you feel comfortable continuing, we can also take over when you're feeling tired.
I will continue.
Great, thanks.
Conclusion. Protests can expose these conditions and their relationship to the policing state. Protests can draw in larger numbers of people. Protests can compel public figures to speak against those conditions. Protests can do many things, but protests alone cannot end police abuse and the conditions that are used to justify it. The movement against police brutality, even in its current inchoate state, has transformed how Americans see and understand policing in the United States. Over the course of a year, Black people from coast to coast have led a struggle to expose the existence of an urban police state with suburban outposts. It has shown the country the depths of the lie that we live in a colorblind or post-racial country. 83% of Americans say racism still poses a problem, unquote, up 7% from 2014. 61% of whites and 82% of blacks agree that, quote, there's a need for conversation about racism in American life, unquote. In less than a year, the number of white Americans who view police killings as, quote, isolated incidents, unquote, has fallen from 58% to 36%. At the same time, in July 2015 alone, the police killed an astonishing 118 people, the most that had been killed over the entire year thus far. By mid-August, they had killed another 54. On the anniversary of Mike Brown's death, Ferguson police shot and critically injured another Black teenager. In New York City, where there was a vibrant anti-police brutality movement for years before the most recent iteration of the national movement, Liberal Mayor Bill de Blasio has pledged to hire 1,000 new police officers. This was surprising, since de Blasio rode the success of the campaign to end stop and frisk into office in 2013. This is only one example of how resilient the police are as an institution, but it also shows elected officials' reluctance to discipline them. The movement is confronted with many challenges, but it has also shown that it will not go away easily. This has less to do with the organizing genius of organizers than with the deep anger among ordinary Blacks who have been beaten, imprisoned, humiliated, and abused, all the while being blamed for their own victimization. The power of ordinary African Americans to push the movement forward was seen in June 2015 in McKinney, Texas, when the police attacked several Black children at a swimming party, including 15-year-old Dajiria Beckton, who was manhandled by one officer in particular. In years past, a story like that would have resulted in little, if any, attention. Instead, a few days later, hundreds of Black and white protesters filled the streets of the small suburban development where the children had been set upon, chanting, quote, "We want to go swimming," unquote, and, quote, "No swimming, no driving," unquote. It must have been a powerful scene to everyone who witnessed it, and for different reasons. Many of the suburban white neighbors who supported the police were outraged, but could do nothing about it. They had been rendered powerless. The police were undoubtedly intimidated by the action, so much so that the most aggressive cop who had attacked Becton was forced to resign days later. Most importantly, though, for the Black children who had been abused and threatened at gunpoint by the police and for their parents, to have hundreds of people show up to insist that their lives mattered must have repaired some part of the damage. For them to see the solidarity of hundreds of white people must have given them some hope that whites are racist and that some would even stand up and fight alongside them. The demonstration may have also validated their right to resist and stand up to racism and racist violence and affirmed that they were right to protest from the very beginning. The Black Lives Matter movement, from Ferguson to today, has created a feeling of pride and combativeness among a generation that this country has tried to kill, imprison, and simply disappear. The power of protest has been validated. For it to become even more effective, to affect the policing state, and to withstand opposition and attempts to infiltrate, subvert, and undermine what has been built, there must be more organization and coordination in the move from protest to movement. End of chapter.
Thank you so much, Joan, and thank you so much to all the readers tonight. Emily, thank you. We are going to now read our discussion guidelines. And I wanted to ask if anyone who's here tonight is maybe interested in reading the discussion guidelines out for us. I'm going to put the file in the chat. So if anyone's interested, you can be the reader. And if not, we have our community member, Roxanne, who will read for us. But if anyone's feeling the urge. Yes, please. I think you have to unmute yourself, Shakira. Okay, yep.
All right, and let me get to the chat. Oh, where is the chat? Okay. Okay. All right. Is this the download, the one I should download?
Yes, exactly. It's a Word document.
Oh, okay. And it's asking me to save as.
Okay. Yeah. So you might have to download it onto your computer.
Sure. I don't care. I don't have permission to save, so you may have a. Oh, wait a minute. Let me just give him the thing they said. Okay.
You can go select all and then copy.
It's in there. Yeah, I got it, honey. I opened. Yeah.
PDF too.
They're just messing. Okay. The guidelines. We agree that any community member that is white or a non-Black person of color will not use the N-word. When referring to or when reading the N-word, the community member will say N-word. 2, we agree not to blame ourselves or others for the misinformation we have learned, but to accept responsibility for not repeating misinformation after we have learned otherwise. 3, we agree to listen respectfully to each other without interruptions. Only one person speaks at a time. However, this does not mean we should ignore problematic statements. We are dedicated to creating a space for, quote, calling people in, end quote, when possible, instead of relying on, quote, calling people out, end quote. However, both approaches are valid and can be done with care and respect with the goal of helping each other learn. We acknowledge that we may be at different stages of learning on the content and discussion topics. 4, We agree that no one should be required or expected to speak for their whole race or gender. We can't, even if we wanted to. 5, we will hold each other's best interests at heart. We hope everyone has come to the table to learn, grow, and share. We will trust that people are doing the best they can. Let's challenge and encourage each other to do better. 6, share responsibility for including all voices in the discussion. If you have a tendency to dominate discussions, try taking a step back. If you tend to stay quiet, try challenging yourself to share ideas so others can learn from you. 7, silence is golden. Sometimes there will be long pauses. Sometimes silence can create space for folks who need that space to come forward. We agree to not fill silences out of discomfort. We will hold this silence with care and move forward intentionally. We welcome those of you whose minds are bursting with ideas to write them in the chat bar. 8, the facilitators are not experts. They are here to help facilitate the process. They and everyone in the group are here to learn. We also recognize that everyone has an opinion. Opinions, however, are not the same as informed knowledge backed up by research. Depending on the topic and context, both are valid to share, but it's important to know the difference. To engage in deep learning, we will want to lean more toward informed knowledge and gain practice reflecting and speaking thoughtfully on difficult topics. 9, it's okay not to know. Keep in mind that we are all still learning and are bound to make mistakes when approaching a complex task or exploring new ideas. Be open to changing your mind and make space for others to do so as well. 10, the facilitators are not moderators. They are not trained to moderate personal grievances. If discussion stops being about the reading and instead reaches into accusations and aggression, please respect the facilitator switching gears and refocusing on the text. If any of these guidelines are breached, Metabolic team member Emily Lacey will reach out to you privately in the chat to provide a reminder. If the guidelines continue to be breached, Emily will provide a verbal call-in. By staying on this Zoom call, you are agreeing to these community guidelines for our guidelines for our discussion period. End of guidelines.
Thank you so much for that reading.
You're welcome.
I also want to let y'all know that it's in the chat as a text form and also as a downloadable Word document and also a PDF. So if anyone feels the need to read them, those are there. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to reread the question that we left you with before we read the reading. And then we're going to practice a moment of silence, about a minute or two, and then we're going to start our discussion. So before we read, we asked you, none of us are free until all of us are free. What do each of us have at stake in the face of widespread oppression and equality? Thank you all for holding that space. I'd love to now open the floor to discussion. So, you know, we have other questions we're going to ask as we go on, but feel free to take this time to discuss really any reflections you have. But if you feel like starting with that question, what are our mutual stakes, feel free.
We'll put the question in the chat as well.
Hello. I'm going to say that the whole fate of the world is at stake as we, all of us together, as we all, I believe all of us understand that we are all interconnected with everything else in the whole entire planet and the whole universe. So as long as everyone is always bickering, the whole fate of the planet is at stake, I believe. I'm sorry to be such a downer, but that's, in general, that's the way I see it.
Hello, this is Lexa. I was thinking the same thing. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, "We will learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or we will die together as fools."
From the reading today, what really struck me in reference to this conversational question was the section about Black women their murders not being reported, or the perpetrators of those crimes kind of barely being recognized for having committed those perpetrations. And I was really struck by the idea that one human life could be valued above another human life by law. And so I think it's important for me to acknowledge that the justice system favors people who are white, that it's a privilege to have justice, find that your life has value, and that really made a really strong mark on me, that it's important to acknowledge that there's a hierarchy, there has been a hierarchy in terms of the history of law in that way.
What you said, Lawrence, sparked a really interesting question for me, because I think about this. I was thinking about this from the perspective of if anyone is dehumanized by a system of oppression, then we're all dehumanized by that system. And then just something about the way you framed that it's a privilege to have justice. I started thinking, yeah, it's a privilege to be a white identified and white passing person, or to not be racialized as a non-white person, and to have justice. But is it actually justice? I mean, it looks like justice. We sell the concept of justice, but is it really justice if it's at the expense of other people's humanity? It isn't. So even the idea that I have a privilege that allows me to experience or obtain justice is flawed, actually. So thank you, because that's a different that takes it another step further.
This is Laura, and thank you again for being here in this amazing series. One of the things that strikes me as so beautiful around the discipline of being interweaving with Earth and Mother Earth at the same time as discussing these deeply rooted things in our, you know, lower chakras is that with the reality of where we are with climate change and what we're doing to the planet as humans, it's actually practically impossible for us to all survive unless, or for any large significant amount of people to survive if we don't connect everyone. And so our, you know, our liberation is truly all tied to each other, and in a way that has always been true, but is increasingly less possible to ignore. So that's kind of the silver lining of the tragedy of climate change, and maybe the silver lining of the tragedy of COVID, etc., is that it's connected, and therefore we must work together and be together. And I was listening to someone the other day talk about justice wouldn't be necessary if we actually had equity, because justice is a response to a wrong. And anyway, I won't go on about that, but I was just outside watering. I've been out of state for a week, and I've been watering my plants, and I knew it would be destructive. That's why had my video off, but I've been engaging with my own plants and beauty in where I am in SoCal during this whole time. So I really love that we do this. Thank you.
I'd love to move on to the next question. Thank you all for those insights. What are some crucial ways that the Black Lives Matter movement is emboldened and enhanced by being led and started by Black women? One way that I have been really kind of grappling with this, like, you know, webbed system of identity is that I think it's really important as a people that we understand, like as the human race, that we understand intersectionalism and the importance of intersectional feminism in particular. And what I mean by that is feminism that's not just strictly the white feminist perspective that was so kind of dominant as a narrative for so long, and that there are all types of feminism, and Black feminism in particular is something that I think is really exciting and important, that Black feminism is taking such a huge stride and lead in the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, literally started by Black feminists and Black femmes. And I think that in a way of like forward-looking narratives of how to, you know, negotiate a future, we really have to look towards Black feminist leadership. And I feel just really grateful to be alive at this time, because this movement has really inspired me and changed my life in so many ways, because I feel that there's leadership that's really, that I can really look up to, you know, and I can really believe in. So that's one way I feel that it's important that the Black Lives Matter movement is led by Black femmes and Black women.
I just want to jump in here, and we're gonna post an article that's in the New Yorker, also written by Kyunga Yamada Taylor, that's specifically a more in-depth look about Black feminists and like the history of it, especially compared with white feminism and the clashes that happened there and how it turned into what it is today.
Thanks, Ryan.
I'll just say briefly, since I just shared, that I too have been just so blown away by the richness of Black feminism. And I think I mentioned I got to meet Alicia Garza and Patrice when they were forming Black Lives Matter, and they were just so loving and firm and solid, and just calling in the circle, you know, and it's just been a beautiful experience. Then I also was blessed to get to work a little bit with Dolores Huerta and Angela Davis in this film about Dolores Huerta, which if y'all haven't seen it, it's called Dolores. And Gloria Steinem says, I would have never learned so much of what I learned without meeting Dolores Huerta and learning her, you know, what she was contributing from the Latina movement. And it's a really brilliant narrative of what you're saying, Maya, I think, about white, you know, like one of the icons of white feminism saying we would be nowhere without Dolores and Angela Davis, etc. So thanks for bringing that.
Well, I'm going to ask the next question, and feel free to bounce back to this one if you'd like. But what are some themes you've seen from police involvement in protests?
One thing that makes me think, that question makes me think about is kind of back to the previous discussion around dehumanizing, is in order for police to be effective at their job within their system, they have to become complicit in their own dehumanization, and then they have to dehumanize others in order to police them. If they're looking for people specifically to detain for any reason. And so if they're coming to protests with that perspective, then they're not there as humans, and they're not seeing the protesters as humans. And it's very hard for as a protester to see the police officers as fully human, because they're performing a non-human role in a sense. They're performing as a system.
I just wanted to say that I really like the way Emily said that. That was very, very good. Thank you, Emily, for saying that.
I feel like the protests been to the police are either absent, like at the protest itself, and protecting someone else's property away, somewhere, protecting something else, themselves or property, or when it's been violent, they've once again been protecting themselves first. Like in Long Beach, it was fences around, 15, 16-foot fences around the police building. And then they were all at the ends of streets. And they were there so far ahead of time that you were kind of walking into a trap. and on the outskirts of the trap was what was to be protected. I don't know how to describe that systemically, except I keep on thinking that they're protecting something other than definitely the protesters, but sort of ghost of capitalism or something. I'm not sure. When you talk about themes, I'm trying to figure out a way to talk about it as a theme.
Yeah, I also like the way that you put it, Emily, with the very nature of how police engage with people and issues. There's a degradation and a dehumanization that's kind of inherent in it. And I heard a really good interview with Alex Vitale, who wrote The End of Policing yesterday, where he was saying what distinguishes police from other roles in society is that they have the violence is they part of their job is using violence, so they're violence workers, and so the inherently, when you hand certain tasks and missions off to the police, it's to use violence to achieve something, whether it's protecting property or whatnot, and there is a dehumanization that goes along with that from the get-go, and the way that plays into racialized capitalism takes the forms of it that it takes in this racist society, with the hierarchies that are in play.
I was looking at and where police is not equipped with guns, and I had similar experience when I visited my brother in the Basque Country. The Basque Country between Spain and France, they have a semi-autonomy, and many cities are policed by citizen brigade. They are volunteers, and when you are hired that way from the community, the outcome is completely different. So when you say the new trends or the new themes in police, I don't see anything new coming out of the police, because as long as they are protecting property and keeping order, they're not going to change, because the status is the same, their drive is the same. So as long as we haven't rethink what policing the city or keeping order means, nothing is going to change. And I think and what came out of many of those protests recently, defund the police, I think it's so related. I think this is the right debate. I mean, seeing Black Lives Matters and defund the police, it's so together. And many other issues with small minorities, they are all linked together. So rethinking the status of Black and brown lives here, it's also thinking order and private property. All of that is linked together. So I don't really see anything new with police. The only new thing would be just to rethink and to completely redo the whole work with police and order.
Thank you all. I'm going to ask our next question, but again, feel free to answer any question you have, feel free to answer any question that is out there. But what does solidarity look like to you? What does allyship look like to you? And what does accompliceship look like to you?
let's see. This is my first time on Zoom on the phone. So am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I think it feels like something. I don't know. I think it's really important for me that that those things that you're describing are feelings that are like happening in relationship, and not necessarily like you know, I know you were talking figuratively when you were like, what do they look like? But I think like in terms of like answering the question honestly, I think it's like not enough for me that it look right or appropriate, that it has to like, in order for me to be an ally, in order for me to be, what are the other words?
I was asking about solidarity and accompliceship too.
And a accompliceship?
Yeah, accompliceship.
Okay. Yeah, in any one of those, I mean, they're just super relational. So the only way that I think it could be authentic is if it was like open in a relationship as a feeling that was constantly informed by that relationship. And that is something that's really important in like assessing the authenticity of those qualities for me.
Hi, this is Lexa. I experienced this when I went to a Dakota Access Pipeline rally that was organized by the Black Lives Matter chapter at Lehigh University. And the First Americans and the chapter from Lehigh worked so well together that the whole event had a good feeling and drew people closer to each other. And I was glad I was there to experience that. Thank you.
I want to say that for allyship, the thing that, well, if I think on it too much, I'll start crying. But when I saw in Portland that white mothers surrounded the Black Lives Matter protesters to protect them, I cannot tell you how powerful and meaningful that is about allyship. Because you can't get any stronger than that. But you say, I'll put down my life for these people who you think are nothing. I'm going to start crying, so I'm going to get off.
I just want to thank you, Shakura, for sharing that. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot too. I went to college in Portland, Oregon, and I've protested a lot in Portland, Oregon, specifically with the movement for Black Lives. And that's something that I really value about Portlanders, is that white Portlanders, you know, Portland is a very, very majority white city, and there's a lot of systemic racist issues in Oregon. But something that I have seen firsthand in Portland and experienced in my own body is putting our bodies on the front line as accompliceship. And that's something that I have been learning about recently, is the difference between accompliceship and allyship, because allyship can be seen sometimes as more hands-off, whereas accompliceship is like physically being on the line and being present and, you know, being a barrier. And, you know, as a small, young, white woman, I can say firsthand that I felt afraid for my life by the Portland Police Department. You know, I felt afraid for my life when they would show up with riot gear to every single Black Lives Matter protest. And when I'd go to an environmental protest, they wouldn't show up. You know, they wouldn't even think to show up. So I've seen firsthand the racism. And if I feel afraid for my life, you know, like, think about who else must feel afraid for their life even more. So I think, like, I just thank you for mentioning that, because I think there is a level of accomplishment that has to be physical presence.
I've done quite a bit of organizing. I took the surge training a few years back up in Oakland, just to sort of connect with other white folks who are wanting to be in direct support for Black lives. And then some of my most notable moments have been not in actual organized protests, but actually out in the world where Black folks are getting harassed, like on planes or on the street, or just stepping in the way of their harm because I see them being treated in a racist manner and in a way that's had actually some of the biggest emotional impact, because it's often not expected and surprised. And it's a little scary, but it feels so good to do that, and not just feels right. Not even feels good. It's just like, no, this is not okay, and I'm not going to be witness to that. This is what needs to happen. Please stop that, or whatever. And yeah. Not even please sometimes.
All right, I'm going to ask our next question too. What did you learn from this reading? What stuck out to you? All right. I think that maybe it's time to show our embroideries if folks are wanting to have some time to have a little end of the night show. That's beautiful, Emily.
Nice work, Emily.
Feel free to unmute yourselves.
Thank you. The freestyle.
You're muted, Shakura. I think you were talking.
I'm sorry, I just want to say goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank
Good
you
night,
so
Shakura.
much.
Thanks
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Everybody's work is wonderful.
Great.
Yeah.
Cindy, that's cool. Is that the planet Earth?
It's an onion.
Yeah, that's the onion, the planet Earth onion. The mama's up here.
Onion tears for the earth.
Yeah. Lisa, can you show yours again?
You know, I'm just getting started. And what I realized is this is hard work.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa. I love learning and listening with you all and working together. Thank you so much for the opportunity. You're so beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Show your embroidery again. I couldn't get to see it. Oh, cool. Yeah.
Beautiful.
I'm doing the same one.
Oh, we
can see. Okay. Wait, give me a chance to pin video. Let's see it again.
I'm seeing the Norris family.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
That's awesome.
I love yours, Emily.
Everybody's doing such great work.
Also nice.
Yeah.
Hey, Phil, what are you doing?
Muted.
Have to unmute yourself.
Gotcha.
Me, I'm intermittently just listening and then checking some email stuff.
Oh, okay.
Were you working on something earlier though? You had some cool like glasses on. Or were you
I was driving.
Oh.
I was driving, yeah.
Got it.
Thanks though.
Cool like working glasses.
Yeah, they're safety glasses, but I just like them.
Hi, Jessica Rath. How are you? What are you working on?
I'm sorry to say that I'm not quite ready to embroidery yet. I have to feed 10 people tomorrow morning, so I was cooking. But I'm embroidery.
Nice to see you. Where are you?
I'm in rural Missouri.
Good. That's probably a good place to be right now.
Yeah, thinking about how I might start talking to my neighbors that I've known for 50 years.
Everyone's work.
About some abolitionist principles.
All right, we'll cheer you on.
Jessica,
very carefully. We have a very trusting relationship, all the people on this road, and it's hard to bring up stuff, and I'm appreciative of having community in LA, and White People for Black Lives Matter has led some really great discussions about how to have hard discussions. So if anybody has had those discussions and wants to reach out to me, let me know.
I was
especially if from the South.
I'm so glad that you have already attended those discussions, because that's what I was going to say. I really suggest, for everyone to listen to. I wanted to share that Ryan and I put together a script, an anti-racist talking point script for how to have discussions online with people who are posting things that need to be called out or called in. And I'm happy to share that with you if that's helpful, but it would be different because you'll be in person. So it's less, you can't really use a script, but if that's something that would be a good resource.
I think that it would be because it reminds you of the tone and the pace and how to listen and find out what their stake is first. And any way you can, all the different ways in which we do that are really important. And being an overtalker, I need all the help I can get.
I think we all need help. These are difficult conversations to have. You know?
Difficult.
Did you put that in the chat or in the resources, Maya?
I'm gonna put that in the chat now. It's on the daily action list that I do every morning. That's also for folks who might not know about this. Metabolic has a daily actions list that is available on our Instagram bio.
Oh, right. I know I saw it before and I couldn't find it when I was looking again. So it's in the Insta. Got it. Okay, cool. Thank you.
It's also in the chat now, and I'm going to put at the bottom of that resource, there's an anti-racist online script that Ryan and I wrote. I actually wrote it before attending the White People for Black Lives meeting, so it doesn't necessarily ask people to go into their mutual stakes, which is a really important point of conversation, but it's more just like direct responses to things that we kept seeing people say online.
Also backed up by different articles and studies.
Yeah, we tried to do like theoretical approach, non-emotional approach to just try to like call people in with some resources. Yeah. So that's what we did.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have to go and it's been totally delightful. I'm glad I got to be on most of this time. I seem to have been running around on Fridays for the last few weeks, so I was delighted to be part of it. You guys are amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura, thank you for sharing.
Thanks. Good night.
Thank you. Hi, Chomsky. Thanks, Lisa. Thank you, Jake. All right, I think we might hop off too. It's almost 10:40 here and we're tired.
Thank you, guys. Good night.
Thanks, Maya. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you, Maya and Ryan.
Thanks, you guys. Wonderful night.
Bye. Bye.
Good night.
Thanks, Maya and Ryan. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good night.
That's been really great.
Thanks, Cindy. Have a good weekend.
Hey, thank you. Okay, I guess we can call it a night. Thanks, everyone.